You get me, got you. You get me, feel it, you. You get me, got you. You get me, feel it, you. You get me, got you. You get me.
Hello, welcome. We are talking politics and religion without killing each other. I am your host, Corey Nathan. It's an honor to be a part of the Democracy Group. That's a network of podcasts that examines what's broken in our democracy and how we can work together to fix it. And we got a good guest today to examine exactly that and talk about some of the solutions that are happening right here in our country, all around our country. Before we start, just thank you to Pew Research Center for making today's conversation possible. And now let's get right to it. I am so happy to be joined today by Frederick J. Riley. Frederick Riley serves as executive director of Weave, the social fabric project. We've had some weavers on here in recent months. Frederick Riley, he's been leading efforts to expand a hyper-local micro grant program, mobilizing grassroots leaders in over 75 communities and shifting cultural narratives around trust and belonging, among so much else. Frederick Riley, thanks so much for joining me today. How you doing?
Thank you so much. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. This is actually a highlight of my day. So I've been in meetings all day. So this is a fun escape from all the things I've been doing all day. So thank you for having me.
You bet, you bet. So we talked before I hit record about whether I should call you Fred or Frederick, and you mentioned your mom. Now I'm just saying Frederick because I don't want to.
No, listen, you have to call me Fred because if you call me Frederick, it's going to be so formal. I often tell people any room that I'm in, I'll say, is this thing being recorded? And if they say yes, I go, I want you to know I have a stalker. And everybody in the room looks crazy. And I go, my mom listens and will watch everything. And afterwards, I'll get an email with a critique of something I said, the way I dressed. She didn't like my facial expressions. And so, Corey, I'm certain she'll listen to this and she'll have a critique. You calling me Fredo is just fine. So I'll add it to
Okay.
the list of other critiques that she has.
Well, since she came up,
Yeah.
your mom, what a story, bringing up
Yeah.
you and your twin brother and your
Yeah.
sisters. Did she, it seems like she had an intuitive sense of certain pillars that she put in place that
Yeah.
assured, it gave you a better chance of success than the Saginaw, Michigan that you came out
Yeah.
of.
My mother grew up in rural Louisiana, Tallulah, Louisiana. And she wanted more for herself, but she more importantly wanted more for us. And so she worked really hard to ensure that we worked really hard. As a kid, I thought my mother was a mean tyrant. But as an adult, I have so much more appreciation and respect for the way that she kneaded the dough of us to get to where we are. And what she instilled in me is an ethic that I bring to this work with Weave, but into my life and so many other avenues. My mother was a stickler for so many things. And because of that, I'm a stickler for a lot of things, but all things good and positive, I hope.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Needed the dough of us.
Yeah.
Could you tell me more about that? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I think like kids are all I won't call them all doughy, but they're all you can love and mold a kid in a direction, right? By modeling, by teaching, by loving and helping to grow. And so what my mother did was all those things, pulling us together as we got ready to go out into society on our own. And so I think a couple of years ago, I wrote an op-ed piece about how the pastor, the principal, and a physician helped me to mold my life. But my mother knew more importantly that we needed role models to help guide us as she was providing the structure and the education. She also provided role models to help guide us through the journey. And so my mother's, if I'll add another title to her, but master bread maker. So she actually kneaded this dough in a way that I feel like I'm doing something great with my life, but it's all because of her and the her persistence.
I appreciate that. I want to talk a little bit more about how you grew up.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that your experiences growing up led very much to what you do today. Is that fair to
Yeah.
say?
Yeah, I grew up in a Saginaw, Michigan, which was once a really industrial boom town. Fur trading, lumber trading, the automotive industry. The city at its height was a city where people flocked to. Folks move from the South to get jobs there. And it's a place that a lot of people landed and made home. But over the years, those same industrial boom towns have had a lot of issues with the downtrodden automotive industry and other industries that have vacated those cities. But I often tell people, but what has always stayed true and supreme to the city of Saginaw is its people, a real ethic, a real love and zest and zeal for thy neighbor. If you grew up in a Midwestern town, you know that in the winter months, you need your neighbors. We've had our power shut off, and it was the same neighbors who would help us run a power cord from their house so that we could stay warm. It's those same neighbors that helped us fill our cupboards. It's those same neighbors that we've done the same things for. And so I grew up understanding what it's like to be a good neighbor, what it means to show up for people, what it means to be a part of a community. And that has driven me to this work that I get to do with Weave. As we teach, we model, we share, we help communities figure out how to get back to that ethic. It's a part of me because I grew up with that type of ethic every day.
Yeah, yeah. Now, as I in my introduction, you might have heard the democracy group
Yeah.
examining what's broken in our democracy and how, ways that we can work together to fix it. I would imagine when you're you're with your neighboring in
Yeah.
such an active way. I think I heard you tell a story about how there were times when you had to run power cords from your neighbor's
Mhm.
house,
Yeah.
and vice versa, sharing meals together.
Yeah.
To me, it seems to me that is a very effective way of solving what ails us. Don't you think?
Yeah, I think it's the only way that solves that what ails us. I think what I saw modeled in front of me as a kid was this idea that I need you, you need me, we all need each other to survive. I
Yeah.
think we live in a society right now that doesn't make room for this real human need for connection, support, and love. But it is the only way. If you think back, Corey, to before nonprofit organizations were a thing, before our governments did any type of aid to people who didn't have a lot, it was neighbors who supported one another. Before there was ever a city fire department, Benjamin Franklin started our country's first volunteer fire brigade, and they began to support fires in a community to put them out. It is how we have become the country that we are. It is through the love for thy neighbor. And in every shift and mold and challenge of our country, it is those same neighbors that who remind us of that ethic that we live up to.
I'd love to put a face on some of the people that, as you talk about it, stitch together your life. You
Yeah,
talked about mentioned the three mentors in that article, but I've heard you also talk about teachers
yeah,
and others. Could you share about
yeah.
some of those folks?
I have two very really great stories, and they're Sharon Floyd and Sharon Smith. Sharon Smith was my fifth grade teacher who she's the person, I think I've always had this positive identity of myself, but she helped to cement it. She taught me in the fifth grade and then said that she was switching to teach sixth graders because she wanted to have me again for another year.
That's
That's how
awesome.
important. But my seventh grade school year, I took instead of going to an all-day middle school, I went to a school for the gifted and talented one half a day, and then a regular middle school the other half of the day. And it was at Sharon Smith's prodding. She said I was smart. She said I was going to be successful. She told me as a kid, she's like, "You're going to be president one day." And she goes, "You need to understand how the world works, and you need to go to this school." So she paid the funds, helped me apply to the school, and drove and took me to take the test. She played such an integral role in my life because that action that she did helped to open me up to so many different people, ethnicities, viewpoints. I spent a couple months in London after winning an essay contest my seventh grade year, and that chain reaction helped to actually help me see the world as a much bigger place than my neighborhood. Sharon Floyd, who is my high school English teacher, and I had a relationship with her up until her passing a couple of years ago, was she knew that for me, college wasn't just a rite of passage like other neighbors, but it was the way I was going to be a part of a healthy society. And so when I went off to college, she would send me letters in the mail and would tuck money in the letters and would say, "I hope this keeps you honest and I hope this keeps you on a straight and narrow path," because she knew I needed it. And so I have been weaved and stitched together by so many people. This work that I do at Weave is really my way of paying it forward because I get to live a really great life. not just because of the work I do, but how I get to show up in communities. But it's because of the modeling I saw of this before that I do the work that I do today.
I just had a quick flash of a memory of Les Miserables,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that moment when Jean Valjean, he's given. So initially, I'm not saying this about you that you didn't steal anything, but there's a certain type of charity that goes above and beyond.
Hmm.
That he stole the candles and silverware
Yeah.
and stuff, and then the pastor, the reverend, whoever it was, gave it to him,
Yeah.
and it was a gift that was almost overwhelming
Yeah.
because the pastor saw his humanity in a way.
Yeah.
Did you ever have that feeling when you were getting that $50 bill?
Not until I got older did I even recognize what the Sharons or what the gift that any of those other folks have given me throughout my life, my childhood into adulthood. I didn't get it. I didn't understand. I thought they were just nice people. And I'm going to be honest with you, I thought they were doing it just for me. And they were
Yeah,
but they were also showing up in the lives of so many other people. It is, I tell people that there are a couple things you can do in a community where you live in. One is really shallow. You can say hello to neighbors when you see them. It reminds them of their humanity and that they're part of something else. The second thing is you can knock on the door and talk to that kooky neighbor that you think is a little crazy, because that interaction might change or shift something in them, or you can find something to get involved in. Those my childhood, I think so much about as a kid. I would usher on our junior usher days at church, and I would stand by the door where my pastor would come out of his study. I just thought he was the most important person in the world. He looked like a giant to me as a kid, and he'd come by and he'd put his hands on my shoulder, on my head, and say, "Hello, my son," or "Hello, my child." And it actually would make me feel like a superhero. And
mm.
so it is that what you just said earlier is that thing. It's that it made me feel like I was something way more important than my neighborhood gave me the vantage point to ever see.
You know what's interesting about that? Like your fifth grade teacher saw something special in you. I think I've heard you say that and I don't know what the categorization is, but your brain process certain things differently.
Yeah,
A lot of other kids in that situation could be seen as outcasts or
yeah,
as bad kids in some way,
yeah.
shape, or form. How do you think you had certain people that were able to see the specialness of it as opposed to the trouble of it? You know?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, it probably started as early as being at home. My mother knew I processed things a little differently. I have a twin brother who we process things differently, and I don't think I was seen as an outcast because I think in the neighborhood I grew up in, the home I grew up in, the church community that I grew up in, they all saw it as special, and
Yeah.
so because they saw it as special, they nurtured it and helped to push me and propel me forward.
I bet that has a lot to do with your mom too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Listen, I often tell people that my mother, I grew up as a kid, my mother read these Harlequin novels, those romance books. I say now it's like those are smutty books now that I'm older. But she would just have them stacked up and she read all the time. And my mother made my brother and I read in that way. And so I read a lot. I have this zest for like learning a lot of stuff. But my mother, and as we thought it was a punishment as a kid, has become like a real special strength as an adult.
Mm. How scary was it for you to go from Saginaw, Michigan to Atlanta, Georgia, where you
the
went to college?
scariest thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah.
It was so scary because I mean I'd spent time away from home on like trips, but never living away from home. And I remember getting on campus and feeling so like a fish out of water. And I felt like, oh my God, am I going to be able to do this? But my college journey was so amazing because I have a group of friends who we are all still friends to this day, but we all grew up in very similar conditions, being pulled apart, being told that you're special, being told, but your home life and the income of your parents didn't necessarily make, you couldn't see that then. And we all gravitated to each other in college,
Yeah.
and we've all been in each other's lives. I'm Uncle Fred to all their kids. I think I've been a best man in I don't know how many weddings, but we all still are connected today. Some of the craziest group chats ever. And I'm like, you all should grow up. But we're still friends and we're still connected. But I wouldn't have made it through that journey had it not been for them.
Did Patrick go down to Georgia with you, or did he go to Marines right away?
No, my brother went right away to the Marines, served for almost 20 years. He's a brute, chews with his mouth open, curses like a sailor. But he is one of my best friends in the whole wide world.
Oh,
We
that's
vote
great.
differently, we see the world differently, but we have this undying love for each other that I don't think any shift in politics that could ever put us on the other side of not liking each other.
I bet that relationship with your brother, the way you just described it, see the world differently, helps you very much in the work that you do today.
Oh yeah. Listen, I think so. I'm a bit of a task manager and I want to tell everybody what to do. And my brother is the same way. And so we have agreed several years ago that if we're still going to be in love with each other, that we have to have some ground rules and some guiding principles for our relationship with one another. Number one, we don't talk politics. We
Oh,
don't. We don't. Nope. Because I know it will be a conversation stopper and we'll fight. And I recognize that.
I just had a lifelong goal now, just like now, because this show is talking politics and religion without
Yeah.
killing each other. I want to get you and your brother on here together at some point.
See, I think like if we did though, it would hurt it would hurt
Oh,
our
okay.
relationship. Now he will ask me guidance on things and I'll give him advice. Um, our second rule is that if we feel the conversation veering into a side of a fight or an argument, one of us will say, let's stop this and let's talk
Pause.
about what we share in common or what makes us in love and not what makes us fight. And I think when we do those things, when we center our relationship and not politics or these other things that make us fight, and we can continue to tap into those things, it keeps us in right relationship. And in some sorts, that's what we're hoping people will do in communities around the country.
That makes a lot of sense because one of the things I've learned from doing this for a few years now is understanding not just what my boundaries are, but depending on my relationship with different people, those boundaries might be different depending on my
Yeah.
relationship with them.
Mhm.
So that's very wise. Okay, so another question I had for you is after college, it looks like you started working for the YMCA.
Yeah.
Um, there aren't a lot of kids that I know who have a sense of, for lack of a better description, a sense of avocation in
Yeah.
addition to pursuing their vocation
Yeah. Yeah.
in an aligned way that you did. Is that something that you were pretty keenly aware of at that time and actively pursued?
When this first job that I took at the YMCA, it was a dream job. I feel like I owe them money for the no money I was paid for my first career, for my first job. But it was an opportunity to sit at the feet of Ambassador Andrew Young and
Oh,
his
wow.
brother, Dr. Walter Young. And it would be, this is a YMCA in Southwest Atlanta. You would be in the YMCA, and I am not joking. Andrew Young would walk through the lobby in a Speedo to go to the pool. It's a sight. But to have him know you by name, or to have him invite Joseph Laurie, or Ralph David Abernathy's widow, or Coretta Scott King when she was alive, over to the YMCA to have lunch to talk about the teen center, I was like, I owe them money for this opportunity. And so I don't know if I picked it because of that, but I picked it because it was an opportunity for me to skill up. The executive director of that Y, Diane Baker King, I just saw her a couple of months ago, was one of the most master teachers in my life. Number one, how to fundraise, but also how to do this work with poise and still help to keep the humanity of the people that you're serving, to see them as human. And so I got so much out of that opportunity that I think that opportunity there to me originally was just a job, but it became a career and a focus of life during the time that I spent there at the YMCA.
Yeah, to your point, it looks like you came back to the organization, and then when
Yeah,
you came back, you like rose up the ranks and
yeah, rose
served an
up. Yep.
entire region. What
Yeah,
were you doing differently? Because there are some younger young adults who listen to this program. I'd love for them
yeah,
to hear what you might have been doing differently to learn what you needed to learn and kind of step up that ladder.
yeah. Listen, I was a dork in college. I used to wear suits to class and carry a briefcase. It was like now on this side of it, I was so lame. But let me tell you what I think I did differently. I think I've always been very focused on who or what I could become.
Mm.
It was a focus. I was keenly focused on it for a couple of reasons. Number one, I knew I wanted to impact our country or our world in some way. So
Yeah.
that's always been at the forefront. Number two, I knew I wanted to live a different life than the one that I grew up seeing around me or the neighborhood. But the third thing was because I've wanted to pay it forward, not only in the work, but I wanted to pay it forward with my helping to guide and direct my nieces and nephews, but also to help to support my mother. And I get to do all those things. I think what I did differently is I have attacked work in my career with those three things in mind, but also with the humility to say, listen, I want to learn all I can from this particular role. What stretch goals can I do? And so over the course of my YMCA career, I've learned how to arc programs, how to do research, and I could almost create a program for almost anything, how to raise philanthropy, how to raise funding so that the work can excel, how to arc people in a way where they bring their greatest to the table and give you more than what you're paying them for. And so I figured out those three things in tandem, and they've served me well at all the jobs that I won't even say jobs, all the bucket of life work that I've done over the last, dare I say, 20 plus years now.
Yeah. So the concept of pay it forward, just to share a little bit about my background, when I was a young man, I spent many hours and many days at the feet of my grandfather and grandmother, who
Okay.
taught. My grandfather was born in Brooklyn, New York. My grandmother was born in what's now Cherny Ostrov, Ukraine, which is part of the Russian Empire at the time,
Wow.
early 1900s. And I couldn't get enough of those stories. But what it did for me was it imbued in me a sense of um, connection, that I was part of a longer story, and
Yeah.
that I wanted to honor that, to hear the stories about what it took to go from where our family had been for probably about 800 years in that part of Eastern Europe, and the sacrifices of what they left behind and what they suffered through in that those
Hmm.
last decades that led to them having to flee. I wanted to honor that. That's where a sense of, as you say, again, pay it forward, and other related concepts were kind of, those seeds were planted in me. Where did that drive to pay it forward come from for you?
Yeah, I think about like some of the same things that you just shared. I think about my mother growing up in rural Louisiana. And my mother is like one of the smartest people I know. But the opportunity level and growing up in a town that doesn't have a stoplight, is becomes like my mother. I think my mother could have been president of the United States if she'd have been born in a different city and at a different time, right? And maybe under different circumstances. I've had the opportunities to do so many amazing things throughout my career, but even before I got into the world of work, that I feel so blessed. And sometimes I pinch myself I'll sit somewhere and be like, oh my God, I can't believe that I'm here or I'm doing this or I'm talking to this person. And so because of it, as a kid, I would always hear my mother say, to whom much is given, much is required. And I have embodied that throughout my entire life. I believe I've been given a whole lot. Maybe I worked for it. I don't know. I don't think I'm that smart or that dedicated. But I believe that there's a lot required of me. And so I try to answer the requirement, that what's required of me. Every day I try to.
Yeah, as much as Stan Lee likes to take credit for that concept of, to him who's given much, much is expected. It's actually a
Yeah.
biblical concept.
Yeah,
It's
it's a
been
biblical
around for
time.
quite a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how did you end up getting the gig at Weave?
Yeah, I was working for the YMCA. I was the chief advancement officer of the YMCA of Greater Cincinnati, and it was a hard decision. I'll tell you why. I worked for Jorge Perez, who I worked for him in St. Louis. I followed him to Chicago, and he called me while I was in Chicago and said, "Do you want to join me in Cincinnati?" And I was like, "No, I don't want to." But Jorge, I often tell people if I could have picked a father back in the day, I probably would have picked Jorge Perez because he is such a pious but also loving and a gentle leader. And I grew so much under his tutelage that I was like, yeah, okay, I'll come to Cincinnati. And I can't remember where I was. I was at a conference and met somebody, and they said, I think you should, David Brooks is looking for a person to run this project that he launched at Aspen, and I think you'd be great for it. And so I said to her, who is David Brooks? And so she started laughing and she goes, that's why you'd be perfect for the role. And so I jumped on a Zoom a couple days later with somebody on the Aspen team. Then I was connected to David, and he says, you got to apply for the role. I applied, went through the interview process. And I think what did it for David is in the interview, I just read his book, The Second Mountain. And he said to me, so what'd you think? And I said, well, I think you talked about people who went through some great tragedy and folks who've gone through some great triumph. But I also think you miss a group of people. I think there are people like my grandmother who would cook an extra meal every day for a passerby because she knew somebody would come by and need some food and some nourishment. And so she would just be have it waiting for somebody to knock on the door. And so there are people who are just embodied this neighborly, nurturing side of them that show up for a community for no other reason other than the fact that they live there. And you should tell their stories too. And so he looked at me, he goes, so you saying I missed a portion? I was like, yeah, I think you did. And I think that solidified it for him. And then over the last 6 years, he and I have been working together to solidify this work around the country.
And what a 6 years it's been.
Oh, it's been a 6 years. It definitely, I think I'm a little more grayer and I definitely didn't have hair on my head when I started here. But they say time flies when you're having fun. I started this role March 2nd of 2020.
Oh,
And this
wow.
was before moved from Cincinnati. My place was in boxes. We got an email saying we're going to practice working from home because everybody was in the office here all the time.
Yeah.
And so that practicing working from home turned into almost 2 years stuffed in a small condo here in DC while we were figuring out how we were going to shift and mold this work to meet the challenge of the time that we're in right now.
And that was your first time living in DC.
My first time, yeah.
Man,
Yeah.
wow. That's
Yeah.
yeah, trial by fire or by
Yeah.
pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So could you talk a little bit about the origination of Weave, the social fabric project? Like how did it get started?
Yeah, so back in 2018, David Brooks came to the Institute, and I think he talked about the fact that he was writing the book The Second Mountain, but he had also experienced this and he's been on the show, so he's probably talked about the fact that, it was after his divorce, he'd open up a drawer where there should have been forks and knives and it was pads of paper for him to write his notes for his columns. And he was like, I wasn't living life right at all. And he met this family and they like loved him back to health here in DC. And so he was writing about the big social issue of our time, loneliness, isolation, tribalism, and wanted to do something about it. And so one of the first attempts, he traveled around the country to about 15 different cities around the country, small, rural places, forgotten about Midwestern hamlets like the one I grew up in, big cities. But they'd ask three questions. Who do you trust? Who shows up for people? Who's the leader in your community? And we heard the stories of these amazing weavers, people who were living countercultural, who were feeding their neighbors, who were connecting their neighbors on community service projects. They are the people who actually could help us to beat the tide in of the loneliness and the isolation. And so David was like, we should share their stories to inspire other people to dig in a little more. And so that was our original idea when we launched Weave was to share the stories to inspire other people. And when I took over the work, I was like, we probably need to add to their resource hub. We probably need to fund some of these projects. We probably need to work on what's the rubric for measuring trust in communities. And so we went and stayed in the same direction of highlighting these weavers, but we added a bunch of layers to it as well.
Mm. So how would you define what a weaver is?
Yeah. So I would say they're in every community. They live countercultural, and they are the people who show up in a community for no financial reason, but because of the reason that they get value out of the place where they live. They're the person who organize a neighborhood cleanup. They organize a community garden. They bring people together over conversation. They're the person that says, Corey and his family are having another baby. Let's do a meal train to make sure that we can help to support them. They are the people who raise their hand to say, it's me. I'll stand in the gap. I will support people in our communities. And that's what we've seen all throughout our country. And which is why we're working to kind of counter the narrative. Although there's some doom and gloom happening, I get energized every week. I get an opportunity to be in a different neighborhood and see some amazing things that are happening in these communities.
So how do you find the John Knowltoners, the LB Privettes, the Nikki
Yeah.
Harrises of the world?
So we found some of them first. Our first iteration at finding some of them since I've been on the team was we launched Weaver Awards, which was a pilot program when I first launched to give micro grants to individuals in neighborhoods who are those people that I just talked about. We opened up the application process. We thought we'd get 100 good applications. We got 300 plus good applications, and we
Wow.
were only going to choose 10. And some of these applications were so amazing. But let me tell you how I approached this. I approached this originally like traditional philanthropy. And I said, they don't spell the words right. Did you read this? This doesn't make sense. And the person on the team at the time snatched the papers out of my hands. And she goes, if you aren't going to read this for intent, if you aren't going to read this for heart, if you aren't going to read this for love and the real weaving aspect of what it means to be in community and do this, you should get off the search committee because we aren't looking for grammatical errors. We're looking for whether or not this connects with your heart. I was like, whoa, okay.
That's convicting.
So yeah, and so we met the some of our first weavers through that project, and we've gone on to scale that to two other communities around the country. But now with this new pivot in our work, where we're going to be funding bigger community organizations to take our methods and do it in their own community over the next 4 years, we will highlight 6,000 more Weaver awardees like those folks that you just mentioned earlier, the Danielle Battles, the Erica Gonzalez, the John Noltners. We will highlight those people all around our country.
So, in addition to providing, you mentioned the micro grants, what other ways are Weaver supported?
Yeah, so we have an online community called Weaving Us, which is a connection tool to connect our weavers in New Jersey and Albuquerque so that they can resource and support one another. Connected to that is a learning center. One of the problems that we believe is why people don't have conversations anymore or get to know people is because they don't have permission and they don't know how. And so, as we're in a skills deficit, and so we have trainings in how to have conversations, how to get to know a person, how to see the humanity in a person. So, as people lack these skills, we want to teach them those skills as well.
Mm.
We That is coupled with some of the ways that we amplified the stories of trust. So we launched last year trustmap.org, which is a tool that takes census data based off trusting behaviors, intentions, and the trusting infrastructure, so that everyday people who can tell that there's something wrong outside can go find their community score and then find some story that relates to their score, good or bad, and then send them on a journey to figure out what's their role in building trust in their community. And we're also working on things like volunteerism, how to get more people doing service in communities, but service that connects, that's mutual, and that is done in person. We think that service is one of the fastest ways to build relationships in communities if done the right way.
Mm. Now you have a way to talk about service. I'm looking at my notes now. There's a few elements to it. One is hyper local,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah.
also transformative service. That's a word I'm
Yeah,
looking for,
yeah.
right?
I think we pivoted. I think we're calling it connected service right now. We're calling it connected service just because transformative service, I think another group is saying that. So connected service is what we're calling it.
Okay. So what
Yeah.
what do you mean by that?
So if you look at they say we're in a deficit of volunteering in our country, but what I would say is I think we're in a deficit of service that matters. And some folks will get upset with me when I say this, but I mean, I remember doing service as a kid or being a kid in the Boy Scouts, and I remember the excitement of our Boy Scout troop leaders. I remember the excitement of our basketball coach because they feel like they were giving something, but they were also being filled up at the same time. And so we believe that service should have a relational component. It should be an opportunity for Corey, you and I, to stuff boxes, but be in relationship with one another and get to know each other while we're building or stuffing the boxes. The other things that service should do is to build mutuality. It shouldn't be doing service for, it should be doing service with. So if you're doing a kaboom site in a neighborhood, you should be doing it alongside of the community because it's important for you not to parachute in. And we think that service should be in community, hyper local. A lot of service opportunities are online, but if we really are going to bring people back together who are experiencing extreme loneliness and isolation, or teach skills in which people know how to talk and have conversations again, you got to do it in person. And it's built repetitiously over a period of time. So this isn't like a one-time deal. This has to happen more than once, repetitiously, for this all to stick.
Yeah, we're relational creatures. So being
We
in
are.
person, in
Yep.
community.
Yep.
Now, the other thing I've heard you talk a lot about is the way you put it is to truly show up for others and community, you must be whole and your best self first.
Yeah.
Curious how you do that for
Yeah.
yourself.
Let me often tell people, I several years ago, back I was working for the Y. I was not whole. I was not happy. I felt like a real public success, but a private failure. Was about 420 some pounds,
Oh,
maybe
wow.
even more. My life was out of whack. I was closeted, afraid to tell my parents and friends and family that I was gay, and it was eating away at my life. I had planned to end my life when I moved to Chicago. I lived for about 6 to 9 months with all my things in boxes because my plan was to end my life and not, instead of me telling my parents or my mom about who I was, and the boxes I would be convenient for her to not have to come identify my body and plan a funeral and pack my boxes. I would leave them all packed for her to just come move them out of my place. And got a wake up call from a dear friend of mine, one of my fraternity brothers, called and said he had a dream. And that one phone call sparked me to get some help, but it sparked me to also be in control and be whole in my own life. Because that one secret that I was holding for myself was stopping me from everything, and my whole life was out of whack. So I work out every day, 6 days a week, watch my diet. I'm honest to a fault sometimes about who I am in relationships with people. And I try to treat myself better each and every day because it is the armor that I wear to go out into a crazy world. So I make sure I use, everything to make sure I'm skilled up before I go out. But part of it, I had to be good to myself first. And I try to do that every day.
Yeah, yeah. Man, it just seems so simple yet so profound, uh, exercising on a regular basis,
Yeah.
eating well. Yeah. But also, what's profound about that story too is that it was a phone call. I was sharing a story with someone just a couple nights ago, and I was reminded of this one night. I had what I don't need to go into the details, but I had an episode. I was diagnosed as bipolar a couple of years
Mhm.
ago, so a lot of what's happened in my life made sense. I had more of a clear understanding of what
Yeah.
happened in certain incidents. But what happens when you have a manic episode or a manic season, inevitably what follows is a trial that's as extreme as that
Yeah.
manic episode.
Yeah.
Well, somebody witnessed something that I had gotten into at a public event, and I was due for that falling off a cliff, emotionally, mentally, and perhaps otherwise. And he just called me. It
Yeah.
was literally like 12:30 at night, and this dude, hey man, just checking in. How you doing? Like you
Yeah.
okay? Without judgment, without like, what the hell did you do? Like wagging his finger or nothing. It was just like, and I swear, like, I don't mean to sound overly dramatic, but he very well could have saved my life that night simply by saying, "Hey, man, I know it's 12:30, but I just want to check in. You all right?"
Yeah.
you
And
know?
and I would go as far as to say he probably did. I think that particular moment that I was in, and I always say like I don't know what sparked him to call me, um, but it saved my life. I think that I think this is what you just shared, and what I shared about the inward journey that I traveled to with, my secret and all this stuff is where a lot of people in our country are right now. Not with the two issues that we brought up, but just with themselves. We've gone inside, we've gone inward, we have gone inside of ourselves, we've retreated. And what happens when you retreat, when you feel like nobody sees you, they hear you, they understand you, nobody knows you, it changes your brain waves. You get angry, and you see this every day as people are re-engaging in society in parking lots and grocery stores. And so, in short, what we're doing is supporting people who are helping, like the person who called you at 12:30. They're weavers in neighborhoods who see people who call them, who grab their hand and pull them back out into a world that they have thought to be unfriendly. And what they're doing in a lot of instances is helping to save lives.
Mm. Now, you've touched on this a little bit throughout in this conversation, but I'd really love to drive home this point. You've talked about three essential elements for guiding the lives of young people, particularly young
Yeah.
men from communities where the way you put it, life's roadmap is incomplete.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit more about those three essential elements?
Yeah, so and I think I wrote that some time ago, but I believe it has to be number one, academics. Like it's an important thing. It whether you're going to become, work, whether you're going to go to college or not, young people need to know basic academics because it helps them to source through life. The other thing is the caring adult relationship. So mentoring really matters. It's an important thing. I tell people I remember some of the mentors in my life, Lewis Skipper, who was my elementary school principal, who I don't remember anything he ever said to me, but he wore a suit to work every day. And I wanted to wear a suit to work like Lewis Skipper.
Yeah.
And most days I'm in a suit, not today. It's a long story about why I have this sweatshirt on today, but I wanted to be just like Lewis Skipper. And then I can't remember the third one from that article, but it has to be like this life skills things, life skills, how to talk to people, how to be in community with people. These are skills that, in my opinion, we've lost. I grew up going to grocery stores and my mother who would have conversations with people, and I'd be so annoyed. Like, why are you talking to these people? You don't even know them. Like, what's wrong with you? And now I've become that person who does this, but we don't know how to do that anymore. We
Yeah.
don't know how to talk to people that we don't know. And those are essential skills that I think will take young people from grade zero all the way up to past college into life in general.
Yeah. Now, so getting back to weave,
Yeah.
could you give us some examples of what weavers are doing around the country? Like what are some of the types of solutions to
Yeah.
weave the social fabric together
Yeah.
again?
One of my favorite weavers is her name is Erica Gonzalez, and she lives in the Panway neighborhood in Baltimore. And she says she drove her daughter across the county, Baltimore County, to a different school. And her daughter says to her basically, "Why doesn't my neighborhood look like this? The
Mm,
flowers, the green grass, the trees." And she says she was taken aback, like she didn't know. And she drove home and she saw her neighborhood and was like, I see where she's coming from with this. And so she got it into her mind. She was going to bring her neighbors together to solve this. And so she got her neighbors together and they cleaned out vacant lots. They pulled up weeds. They cleaned out drug needles. They found dead rats. They did all this stuff to make this part of their neighborhood look really beautiful. And so they built a stage and they took the stage and they started hosting arts and cultural events in this rough neighborhood in Baltimore. They built a public library in the alleyway on the streets that people come and check out books in this particular 3 block radius. We took that year's Weaver Awardees class to the Baltimore Symphony, and Marian Alsop, who was the artist in residence, they got a chance to go backstage and meet Marian, and they had a conversation. And Marian said, "I would love to come bring a part of the Baltimore Symphony to that neighborhood to play one night." And we were like, "Yeah, right." She did. A couple months later, she packed up a part of the Baltimore Symphony and brought them to that neighborhood. And the
wow.
audience that day is now Governor Wes Moore, the current mayor and mayor at the time, the mayor Brandon Scott of Baltimore, but all these dignitaries and people from across this neighborhood. And I'll never forget a little old lady in the neighborhood says, "I've never even seen violins in person in this
Oh,
neighborhood." And so what she has done is to create a method to bring people together through these experiences, but also cleaning up her neighborhood in a way that they would have never been able to do before had it not been for her vision or the prodding and the question of her daughter. And then we go to Chicago. Aisha Butler, who is in a rough neighborhood, well, a once rough neighborhood in Chicago. And if you've ever been in Chicago, you see there's a home, 3 vacant lots, a home, 2 vacant lots. And research is pretty like serious about this, that if you live in a neighborhood with blighted homes and vacant lots and there's nothing there, crime goes up because people don't see a reason to follow the rules. And so Aisha got her neighbors together and they bought those vacant lots for $1 on the pop. And a bunch of them got together and they built homework stations, grilling stations, small mini parks within her neighborhood. She's now the trusted leader in her neighborhood. I've gone to this neighborhood, got out of my car, and as I'm walking up the street, she gets 3 phone calls. Who's that man walking up the street? Because she's the trusted person in her neighborhood. She connects a community. She's built the resident association of Greater Inglewood, and she has found a way to bring people together and do work together, which is the key. They do work together. And that particular act has brought together the neighborhood and crime has gone down because of her action to connect people. And there's stories like that all across the country in big cities, small towns, Midwestern communities where people have decided I should be the person to solve this and bring my community together to work around this.
I love that. How do you think folks in their own communities or on their own blocks, as you would put it, can develop the imagination of what being a weaver in their community might look like?
Yeah. So I'd say they could probably do a couple of things. They could go to our trust map, and they can find either their trust scores and they can find a story that connects to find something that they can do in their community. They can start up on their own. Community gardens are the fastest way, in my opinion, to bring people together. The other thing that they can do, and in my opinion, an easy thing to do, is to join into something that's already in action. Do a quick search of things that are happening in your neighborhood. Go volunteer somewhere. Go find something to get active in. I don't think everybody can be Erica Gonzalez's or Aisha Butler in their neighborhood and start a whole organization and build stages. And I don't think everybody should do those things, but there is something that you can join into that's already active, or you can get inspiration from our monthly newsletter, where we catalog things from all around the country, all different types of things that people are doing. And you can find that at weavers.org. And I would say go get inspired to dream a little bigger about what your neighborhood can be. And the one caveat I'd add to that is that I think we think that only people in rural communities or blighted places need to dream big about how they can solve issues in society. But there are issues in every neighborhood, every hamlet, every city, every town, every block. And it just takes one person, whether you're in a suburban community, a rural community, a really high income neighborhood, to raise your hand and say, I'm going to help solve for this for the people in my neighborhood.
Yeah, I one of the stories I love is Pastor Amy Schenkel. She just put a picnic table in her front yard.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So just to say, it could be simple yet elegant, like I said.
Yep. It could be simple but elegant and bring people together. Yeah.
Yeah. I got to start to wrap it up here, but
Already, I feel like we just started talking.
we just started talking.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do want to ask you our TP&R question.
Yeah.
And that is, what do you think each of us can do to be able to share space with, have better
Yeah.
conversations with, perhaps even nurture relationships with people across our differences? So,
Yeah.
just kind of like you and your brother, people who have different backgrounds and beliefs than
Yeah.
we do, who get their news from different sources, and we'd have different experiences than we do.
Yeah.
How can we do better at talking politics and religion without killing each other, or is it
Yeah.
even possible?
I think it is possible. I think first, if you go into the conversation or the relationship thinking that you're gonna first talk politics, I think you're already going to end the time badly. And so I think you go in first trying to build a relationship, trying to understand, trying to build connections, and trying to connect on these things that we all inherently have in common. We all have a common humanity, and if you dig deep enough, you can even find the common humanity in people who you disagree with big, right? You can find something to connect on. And so I often tell people if you can cement the relationship on what you share versus how you differ, it will make way for the conversation about what you differ. Or it becomes so minuscule in the grand scheme of things that you're just in relationship and you don't even have to talk politics or religion.
Yeah, yeah, that makes so much sense. What you share in common, shared values.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. There's people that I have such different views on, feel very passionately about certain issues, but we are able to continue in conversation and in relationship because we have shared projects that we're doing together,
Yeah. Yeah.
shared endeavors that we're doing together, and also shared values at the end of the day. Even if we disagree on how to arrive at what our goals are,
Yeah.
those shared common goals, there's still the I don't know, it's the tissue of relationship, the
Yeah.
the makings of a relationship.
And
Um,
and Corey, I think I'll also add immaturity is a part of it. Corey, I feel like I'm such a different person. I'm grounded. I feel like I'm definitely smarter from hanging around, reading, being in community with people who I disagree with.
mm,
I don't think I'll ever go over to the side or join a club that I don't want to be a part of. But I definitely think that unpacking the why is more important than the person proving to you their why. I think if you unpack the why a person believes this or where they come from or what their childhood was like or what made them experience that, it helps to connect you to a different side of them. I think I understood my mother better as an adult when I understood more about her childhood.
Mm.
It made me have a level of even way more respect for her, but also empathy. My therapist sent me through this journey of, how do you see your mother as a child? And if you see your mother as a child, what does her childhood tell you about how she operates as an adult? And if you could heal that child and hug that child or have any type of, you know, uh, uh, empathy for that child, how does that go over into the adult? And I think if we all saw each other as kids with adult clothes, gray beards or bald heads, and you're just a little kid dressed up in this way, it gives you a greater lens into their life, but also it gives you more empathy for how those struggles have gone into adulthood.
So you've been to a lot of different parts of the country. Have you ever gone back to the town? I think it was you said in Louisiana where your mother grew up.
I've spent a lot of time there. I spent, we were there several years ago for my grandmother's funeral. But I didn't grow up spending a lot of time there. I grew up spending most of my summers in Saginaw, Michigan, doing homework, before we could go outside and play.
That's funny. All right, so now you get to turn the tables on me. Do you have any
Yeah.
questions for me?
I did. I had a different set of questions, but I think I want to first ask, and thank you so much for sharing about your journey with the bipolar disorder. And I just wonder, how do you still show up with, we live in a world where some would say that might be something to stop you. And how do you still press forward even though you have moments where you may be crippled and can't move forward?
I'm reminded of a story. I don't know if I've ever shared this on the air. I'm reminded of a story that might seem like it has nothing to do with this, but it really does. A buddy of mine was in a play in New York with a guy named George Zanza, and it was at a legend of the New York theater named Uta Hagen, her theater. And she was producing the play. And woman star of the play was the voice from Sleepless in Seattle.
Mhm.
And Uta Hagen, this legend of the New York theater, comes in and she sees a bit of the rehearsal and she just rips everybody a new one. And everybody's feeling really dejected. And I went out with my buddy and these two actors, and we're sitting. It was actually a nice day in New York, a spring in New York, and the lady who's the voice of on Sleepless, I forgot the actress's name, but she's smoking a cigarette. And George Zanza, another pretty legendary actor, he goes, he goes, why the hell do we do this? Why do we put ourselves through this? And she takes a big puff of her cigarette. She goes, because we must. So I honestly, like, there have been times, and as long as I've been doing this, you would think that I've like matured to another level, that I'm not going to have an episode as I described it before. But I do, man. I still do. But I can't not do it. I don't know. I can't not do it. I know what it looks like, and I know the scars and the wounds that are opened up when especially not when somebody else fails me, but when I fail myself and I fail the other
Mhm.
person.
Yeah.
I know how much that hurts, but I don't know if that's an answer for you, but I don't know how not to do it.
Yeah.
I
No, it's
keep on
totally an
going back
answer.
into it.
Yeah, no, it's totally an answer. What would you say to young people who are, I meet young people often who are struggling with something and they have retreated inward and they're retreating inward. We talked about earlier how difficult it is. But I think one of the problems is they don't have the skills on how to come out or what to do when they come out. It feels
Mm.
like you figured out how to do that. What advice would you have for them?
Oh man, so you got another couple hours.
Yeah,
Well, first of all, I think one thing is I think a lot of us go into these conversations with rehearsing the wrong things.
yeah,
So a lot of times we're going in rehearsing a good zinger to win a point. I
yeah,
think that's the wrong rehearsal to go through, the
yeah,
wrong preparation going into these conversations. My preparation, you probably know Monica Guzman, right?
yeah, yeah,
So my preparation is informed by the title of her book. If I'm going into a conversation, I know I'm pretty far apart on
yeah.
certain things with the person whether it's, going to coffee or going to the local pub or just, a more organized event. What I'm rehearsing is my own disposition is I
Mhm.
want to be I want to be open enough to get to the point where I say, oh, I never thought of it that way.
Mm,
So that's one. Two is having proper expectations. So if we think that we are going to get into a conversation and we're going to, forge a relationship and we're going to convince them to make a 180-degree turn right then and there in one conversation, I just think that's the wrong. That's the wrong mindset and the wrong expectation of what's going to come out of this. But if you can have 1 degree of influence, that means the world.
yeah.
But here's the irony in that. In order to be, I am at my most persuasive when I am most persuadable in some way.
Mm,
So being willing to have a degree of change, a degree of how I change my mind, that's it's this weird poetry in human dynamics where that's when I'm also most persuasive. So that's two. But three is something that you pointed out before is understanding our own limitations.
yeah.
Understanding I might not be the right guy to talk to this person. I might
Yeah.
not be, or I might put myself in too much danger for me to be effective in any way. I might need to protect myself. There's
Yeah.
times when it's just like, no, man, I'm allergic to that. I break out in hives when I touch that. I have an
Yeah.
episode when, this personality does X, Y, and Z with me. Like, so I've had to learn in a hard way, like, even though I keep on entering into these conversations, there might be somebody that I'll still love them, but I got to love them from a safe distance.
Yeah. Wow.
So
Wow.
those
Wow.
three things come to mind.
Do you have time for just one more question?
Sure. Oh man, this is okay. Yeah,
Well,
sure.
so I think so throughout the conversation, this wasn't a question from you, but you basically asked me about my why and why
Yeah.
I do this, why I approach it. Why why are you doing this work to because I mean I think the work you're doing is in the same realm of what we're trying to do around the country. How do you bring people back together to be in relationship essentially? And so what brought you to this?
Yeah, there's two main things. One is the religious side of it.
Okay.
And that is, so I grew up in an observant Jewish family, very much like David did, but I became a Christian very much like
Okay.
David did in my adult life.
Okay.
I think I was 29 or 30 when I became a Christian. So when I first became a Christian, I was having these conversations with my dad that were and other people in my family, other people I went to that were in our synagogue. Very hard conversations about religion. And at first, I was going about it what they call informed by studying apologetics, like how
Yeah.
to make a case for the hope that's within you. So I was studying that to try to win arguments, basically, and try to convince people
Huh.
to my beliefs in some way. But I've come about it. I've come to a different reason for the religious side of those conversations. It's that I want to be, there are commonalities where we can all agree that there is, in fact, something broken in the world. The Jewish concept of tikkun olam, and
Hmm.
we're in this together to heal what's broken in the world.
Wow.
To be a part of, if you think of it from a Christian perspective, like God's big redemption project. I
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
participate in, and God is allowing us to participate in God's redemption project. So I go into these conversations with that in mind. The politics side of it is also sort of related to the church. When I first started going to church, I realized that a lot of guys I was in Bible study with, or going to our Sunday school class or what have you, they they were primarily worried about political and social issues. And when their political preferences bumped up against what we were clearly reading in scripture, they would somehow get around to their political prejudices.
Wow.
One obvious one is like, I remember reading Leviticus 19, and when you get to the end of the chapter, it couldn't be more clear about what our disposition should be as the people of God in relation to to people outside of
Yeah.
immigrants
Yeah.
among us,
Yeah.
right? But there were some guys who were such staunch, closed border, and they had a way of thinking of the immigrants among us. That so I that
Wow.
not to say that I'm a prophet.
Yeah.
Um, I don't want
You
to.
could. I'd believe you. I'd believe you. So go
No,
ahead.
no, it's not
No.
that. It's just that I think that we have that's not even the right framing of it. It's just that there are certain communities that everybody is just nodding along with each other. But every
Mhm.
once in a while, you need okay, a quick story to kind of describe the
Yeah.
dynamic here. there were two granules of salt in a salt shaker,
Yeah.
one elderly granule and one kind of younger granule. And the younger granule of salt was just getting nervous every time the salt shaker got shaken. Some of their friends were, went away and they never saw him again. And young salt granule was just really nervous, like, what's going to happen to us? And old salt granule knew what's going to happen. It's like, there's the soup. We're going to get shaken into that soup. And young granule is like, oh, that's terrible. And and the older, I'm not telling the story great, but the older
No,
granule was like, yeah, so we might be shaken out into that soup, but you know what? Once we're in that soup, the soup will never be the same again.
wow. Wow.
So
Wow.
so I feel like I'm kind of a salt granule, a
Yeah.
little salty in those
Yeah.
situations because
No.
everybody else is nodding along. But sometimes you
Yeah.
need to look at, hey, look at what Leviticus 19 says. Maybe we
Yeah.
should think differently about how we're treating, the folks that are, on that come from a different side of an imaginary line that somebody drew on a
Yeah.
map, you
Yeah.
know? So
Wow.
I don't know. That's why I keep on going into it.
Corey, I think that's amazing. I just do. I remember as a kid in the children's choir at Zion Missionary Baptist Church in Saginaw, Michigan, when we would come into the second Sunday service, we'd sing Children of God, we're marching into Zion, and they get to the end and say, and they'll know that we are Christians by our love, by
Yeah.
our so it's something that I try to live by my
Yeah.
I don't always win at it, but I try to live my life modeled and they'll know that we are Christians by our love.
By our love. And that's one other kind of appendix to some of the things that I might say to a younger person or somebody who's newer to these types
Yeah.
of conversations is that, you know what? The greatest hitters of all time were still batting in the 300s. So that means that even the greatest hitters of all time were
Yeah.
failing two-thirds of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as long as we give ourselves at least that much grace,
Yeah.
we'll do okay, but keep on coming back for more and keep on working on your swing.
Yeah.
So, real important before we go, you did mention it before, but how can folks follow you, find more information about Weave and all the great
Yeah.
work that you and the team are doing?
Yeah, they can find us at weavers.org. You can come to weavers.org and you can join our Weaving Us online platform, sign up for our newsletter, or come just get a dosage of something that's happening really good in society to inspire you to jump out of your home and go do something in your neighborhood or where else. Corey, it's been amazing talking to you. Thank you.
It's really good. I don't want to cut this off because just to make sure, is there anything important we haven't covered that you want to add before we wrap it up?
Corey, I feel like you've touched everything. I was gonna go back and tell you about my third grade teacher, but I think we already talked. No, 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 no. I think no, you did your research well. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for that. No, there's no, I don't think there's anything burning. I think, we're still in this good fight. We are expanding, and I feel like the work that we're doing is really helping either to highlight the social issue, but also help to connect it with some inspiration of what's already really happening and scale up a country and people who we've forgotten our humanity and how to know people again. And it's our quest to show people, to guide people, and support some of these cool projects that are happening around the country.
Amen. Amen. Well, okay, so I'm just going to give you the heads up. I'm going to be in DC. You're in DC, you said, right?
I'm in DC, yeah.
Okay, so I'd love to grab a beer. If a beer's not your thing, grab a
Yeah.
coffee or what have you. So I'm
Maybe
going to be
gin,
there.
maybe not a beer. I don't like the taste of beer, but I'll have some
I
gin,
don't
okay?
either, actually.
Yeah,
My diet has changed over the last couple.
yeah,
Anyway, but I'd love to connect in person.
yeah,
I'm going to be there mid-March and then again in early June. So I'll give you the heads up when I'm there. I really would
yeah.
like to buy a sandwich or something.
Yeah,
Um,
no, totally. If once you know the dates, let me know and we'll
okay,
cross-reference. And yeah, we'd love to see you in person.
that'd be great. This is
Yeah,
really terrific. Fred, I'm going to call you
yeah.
Fred now.
Fred,
And
call me Fred. We're family now. It's too late. We know too much about each other.
we're
So
mishpacha. We're mishpacha.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
awesome. Thank you again. And as always, we'd like to thank Pew Research Center for making today's conversation possible. And if you dig what we're doing here, engage with us on any of the socials. I'm really easy to find at Corey S. Nathan, Corey, S as in Sam, Nathan, especially over on Substack. We're getting into some really great conversations over there. Now go talk some politics and religion and all kinds of other stuff, but with gentleness and respect, and have a great week.